Olatunde, can you introduce yourself? Tell us what you do. Tell us what you do for a living. All of the things about you specifically.
Okay. Well, I am. First of all, I would probably describe myself as a mother of teenage children. That's that one job. Second job is I work as an art therapist and a trauma therapist. I work in private practice, so I'm self-employed. That's what I do. I live in Manchester, in England, and I'm not sure what else to tell you.
Very nice. Thank you. And thank you for coming on with us. Can you tell us the title of your chapter in the Neurodiversity Reader?
Zero Tolerance of Black Autistic Boys. Our schools failing to recognise the needs of African Caribbean boys with a diagnosis of autism.
So basically, Olatunde is her chapter is about intersectionality of autism and race. We have African Americans in America. In England, from what I learned in your chapter, you have Caribbean.
Yeah, so the way that people might describe themselves of being of African Caribbean descent. So because of migration that happened in the 40s and 50s and continues, there's quite a big migration to the UK because, of course, a lot of the Caribbean islands were colonies of Britain.
So can you tell us about your son's experience?
So my son had generally through primary school been kind of fairly settled, fairly okay, not anything that anybody would be particularly worried about. Generally was a very good student. Quite shy, I would say, maybe, but got involved in football, was very able in the class. And then when he moved up to secondary school, we started to find out there's kind of quite a lot of low-level destructive behaviour, and that's how it's been described to us, kind of low-level destructive behaviour. You know, we're kind of on top of it. And what had happened to him was this has gone on for 2 or 3 years before the school then decided, this is quite serious now. So at no point had we been, brought in or asked to, think about what was going on with him. I certainly hadn't any thoughts about, maybe there's something he's experienced that he can't settle in school, because his primary school years have been fine. He was a, very well-behaved student, very studious, got lots of high marks. So we weren't quite sure what's going on. At the same time, which I think is important, that I was unwell. From them being quite a young age, I was diagnosed with ME. So for a number of years when they were very young, there's a lot of disruption in their life. So whatever was going on, there was reason for the school to consider what might be the context of this young person's, sort of challenges and what was happening to him emotionally and psychologically. But that just, felt like it was low-level destructive behaviour. We kind of know you. You're a good family. You went to the primary school as a feeder. And, we're managing it. So that's really all we'd understood for a long time.
But he was struggling.
He was struggling. I think in the academic work he was doing okay. I also want to say that at the point that he went into primary school, he was probably 5'6", 5'7", really tall young man. So, quite a character as well. So very bright, very articulate. So I think for quite a long time they tried to just guide him, really. I think that's what they tried to do. And then I think he moved groups from the kids that were in the very, sort of top sets of the school to some of the kids who were doing less well, which I think he sort of found his own place with. My guess is now people who he could relate to and connect with and, have a bit of fun, actually, sort of a lot of it, schoolboys, silly behaviour, which, that's what happens in schools. That's what children should be allowed to do.
That's right.
Yeah, but it got to a point where they would begin to recognise his behaviour as not fitting in with the school ideas of, how you should behave. Very rule-based, very, it was a religious school, so lots of expectations of good conduct. All this kind of language about, you're not one of us because you're behaving like that. And now we've got ways to describe you that are destructive, low-level disobedience. Another word, I'm trying to think of another word they used to use about him quite a lot. Chosen behaviour. All this sort of language, and not really understanding what the dynamics were, because as a parent I'm concerned if he's in class he's not behaving the correct way or he's being rude or whatever. I want to know about that and trying to really find out from him what's going on, and he wasn't able to say what's going on. He was doing what he was doing.
And so he got in trouble, and then they did a risk assessment on him. Can you tell us about the risk assessment?
Yeah, well, what happened after about 3 years of this, they decided they wanted, so there was a number of sort of day exclusions or short-term exclusions, and it kind of built up a number of these. Then they got to the point where they said, we're really concerned, we wanted to call a meeting, And at that point, they were going to suggest that he was permanently excluded from the school. There'd been one more incident, and it's a really significant incident that happened. This is an autistic boy who was told he was going to get something back at the end of the day. He went to get that thing back. He was confronted with the teacher saying, well, can you not say please? Can you not say please? He was already stressed at this point. So at that point, he gets very upset, very angry, has a bit of an outburst, really. I mean, nothing more than an outburst, very, shouting and upset, clearly because of what happened. And it was that incident that they decided he was going to be removed from the school. So this is where we then went through a process. The school submit a case to their governors, and in that case material, they'd actually included a risk assessment. And the risk assessment has, basically a tick list. I know what a risk assessment is. A risk assessment is you assess risk of low, medium, high. You make some notes about that and look at how you mitigate those risks. This was just a tick list of high risk of involvement in gangs, high risk involvement of having a weapon, high risk of drug misuse, high risk of, I can't remember, there's a whole load of thinking, well, what is this about? And I recently had this conversation with somebody else, and they said, what you should have done at that meeting is said, can we change risk to vulnerability? And that would have made all the difference in terms of the way that, you think about this child is vulnerable, because it's a vulnerable child already because it's a child. So to me, that was, something really important. The school didn't do that. They categorised him, just as far as I'm concerned, racial profiling. This is a list of things that we expect black boys to be engaged in. We haven't got any evidence of this, but now this is a document, a public document that's going to go to an appeal process.
It's as if they watched like a gangster movie or something and checked and wrote down all of the things in the movie that the black men did and just put it up there.
Yeah.
Because assessment, you have to have data for that. It's not like you came to school with a gun.
We'd have thought they would need to have written something about, because the whole thing about a risk assessment, there's always a space for comments, because you then need to comment about either what you're going to do or what the evidence is for this. There was nothing, so it was just this, and I looked at it. I think I was so shocked as a mum. I was really shocked. I couldn't think in that kind of, I suppose, in that kind of professional sphere, thinking, what does this mean? I was just really shocked that they'd done this, but we were also moving towards a process where we now having to fight the school. So that was just part of the bundle, which we were going to then be presenting, to the appeal, and then onwards to a tribunal, and to not seem as vulnerable.
I see that a lot in the States as well, and the amount of compliance that our schools are asking of our kids, and when they don't meet the expectations, the language that they use is so behaviorist, and it's always
only behaviorist,
and it always presumes that the child is making a willful decision to do that behavior. I mean, they use the language like defiant, disobedient, unwilling to follow the rules, maladaptive,
rude.
Yeah, we could go on and on and on. And it always presumes the worst of the child, first of all. Let's just say the kid is running. They will say that this child is chasing someone, or, they will put that kind of,
And this is something that my daughter went through, the same experience, where she would go, she had a card, to leave the classroom for some time out. So she'd go out onto the corridor for time out and then be challenged by several teachers. What are you up to? She said, Mum used to say to them, what do you mean, what am I up to? You're assuming so much by saying that. I mean, she could articulate that, I'm so pleased, but, when somebody says, what are you up to? It used to make me so angry, then they just walk off, and then she'd be called rude, because she's actually there, taking some downtime to be left alone. And several times I had to go and keep repeating to the school, time out is time out. Not to have banter, not say, hi, how are you? Just ignore her. That's fine, that's what she wants.
Right.
Know what she's up to. Well, what does that suggest? In the school corridor, I'll have a guess. Robbing the place.
One of my good friends locally, her son was having pretty much the same problems that your son was having, and walked into school one day with her beside him. She works at the school, and the security guard comes up to him and says, now this is at 8 a.m. in the morning, so it's a brand new day, right? You're not going to get in any trouble today, are you? Like, automatically, just bringing that baggage back onto this child. Yeah.
Advisors triggered at that point, so you've got, an option to kind of get away from it, or kind of, try and get through it. And, we've got that whole thing about the level of anxiety that children are carrying in those circumstances, so they're just waiting for a teacher to say something. And that, is part of their whole school day, whether it's, traveling to school or, being in school, that somebody's making some inference. It's like, we've got our eye on you because you're trouble in some way. It's absolutely appalling.
So what ended up happening? Can you tell us in the result of what happened? Or do you want people to buy the book?
Oh, yeah, buy the book. Well, absolutely buy the book. I mean, I can tell you what we went through in terms of the whole process within the UK. You go to the local authority and have an appeal to get the decision overturned. They said they couldn't overturn it. It was quite clear from the input from one of the psychologists that they'd identified there is some issue going on here that's underlying, possibly ADHD, I would say, maybe autism. She wasn't there to diagnose him, but to give some background. So we went through this process. The school back turned us down. They absolutely were very rude to us. They were kind of getting quite aggressive with us in the meeting. And then that ended up because my son absolutely wanted to go back to school. So we said, God, we'll fight them. But after 15 months, we got a tribunal date hearing, took it to the tribunal, who within the first few minutes, you could see that they were really concerned about the way the school behaved. We had a letter that had now got a diagnosis of autism, because that hadn't been done before. And the school wanted it to be not taken into account on the day before. That was the first thing that we heard, and the judge was appalled, saying, well, it's material to the case, this is the very case that's being brought, that this child's got an underlying unmet need. How can you ask this letter to be discounted? And then they wanted to know who'd written the letter, who was the person who was qualified to make this diagnosis. I mean, this was in front of the judge. I thought, I would be embarrassed as your colleagues if you were behaving like this in such an official place where it's a discrimination tribunal, and you're still in that position of thinking that you're right, still going on with the same idea that this child is maybe isn't autistic, whatever it is about. It's just chosen behaviour.
And basically, from what we talked about before, you were basically forced to get him an autism diagnosis.
Yeah.
In order for the schools to even hear anything.
But we had to prove it.
Yeah.
In the UK, like, you do not have to have a diagnosis. If you can show by your behaviour and your challenges that you have an unmet need, that's enough. But we knew we were going to be able to go and win with that, and that was a kind of dilemma for me, because it's a psychiatric disorder. That's what it's listed as. And I had to make a decision, because my child was under a certain age, to go down that road. I explained it to him. I kind of got his consent, and he was willing to do that, because it actually meant, one, his needs would be recognised, he would get the supports in place, and if they continue, that we're then in a different place of discrimination, and that we can now challenge them. So it was a lot of talking with him, for him to appreciate what we were kind of getting involved in and what that meant for him. But most importantly, I think the more I have this conflict about it, it's actually about getting the support that you need. Yeah. Hopefully one day it won't be the DSM, but it's about getting the support that you need, and it is not a disorder. And I think that's something that is difficult, because that's something that I think a lot of people are questioning. Well, why is it in the DSM? In the way that being gay used to be in the DSM, is a mental illness.
And a question that I wrote down, and I didn't send to you, but I'm sure that you can answer this for me. But so did your son go back to that same school afterwards? Yes. And how did you feel about that? I'm torn about that. Like, that school has pretty much, at least emotionally, been abusive to your son. That they don't, or you can at least get the feeling that they don't want him there.
Oh no, it's not the feeling. They said in the core.
Oh, well then, yeah. So I mean, that they don't want them there. I mean, I know that he's older, so it's different when they're older. But like, I struggle with that. Like, if I don't want my son to be anywhere that he's not wanted, you know what I mean? How did you
explain it to you? So all along, I said to him, "What do you want?" And that's what it was about. What do you want? He said, his sister was at school too. I want to go back to my old school. I said, right, to make that happen, this is what we have to do. You have to kind of get on with the problem that they've given you. You have to make sure you turn up. You have to just be willing to be patient. But if that's what you want, that is what's going to happen. And, I couldn't promise him. I wanted to promise him, come what may it, you're going back to that school. That's what I wanted to say to him, because I was very clear that is what's going to be. That's what he wants. And it wasn't a kind of fight about trying to prove something. This was his community. this is his whole primary school years and all the children that he grew up in and around. But, that's what he knew. He said he wouldn't go to new school. He's autistic. He's not going to get used to a new environment. And I think one of the things about us as a family is that we can stand up and say, this is what we want, and we're going to go for it. We're Northern English, we're tough, and we're also Jamaican descent. And that's the sort of stuff we've gone into battle. This was, we're going into battle, and we will go back to school. There was some difficulty when he went back, but he's also a very kind of resilient kid. And I don't mean that he wasn't harmed by it, but there's a sense of pride that, I belong here and I'm doing it. And that very kind of stubborn kind of, this is what I want and going for it. So in a way, I couldn't not get him back into that school, even if I thought it was a bad idea. At times I did, but I thought, no, this is what he wants. This is where his sister is. His sister will miss him. It's his little sister. There's a place of belonging there, and that to me is so important. We were the only family in Manchester who actually had a child return to school after being permanently excluded.
You just ask them what they want.
Yeah.
See, I'm not at that phase yet because my kids are so little. So it's, I still got the little ones, but that is a great answer. And it does make it makes it easier to say, okay, well, let's do this. Yeah.
And let's do it in partnership, because it's not just about me doing everything for you, but like, what are you going to do? What are you bringing to the table? Are you going to go to school? Are you going to do your best? Are you going to show them that you're willing to, do some of the things that you might need to do, or, think about and
to prepare for any other, triggering moments, because there will be some.
Yeah. And it was tough, and I think it was tough for the school as well, because he'd kind of gone in having won, which I think was very difficult for the school. And he's very articulate, outspoken boy. So I'm sure he tried to remind them as often as he could. But that was his right. It was his right. We were really up against it as a family. We had no representation. We saw the school had solicitors. We went to a further tribunal. They brought a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, barrister, to the last tribunal, and another solicitor. And it was just me and my partner when we went to that tribunal. I think that's what you brought out to for us as parents who are actually facing this. That's where's the we knew where the power lay, but where's the honesty in that this is a religious school that, for me, those values are important. I'm not necessarily a religious person, but when you say you've got values and they're about justice and social justice, then I want to see that. I want to see it.
Right, you need to have the values for everyone.
Yeah,
not just for one. Yeah. Can you run us through some of the key points of intersectionality? Like, what is intersectionality?
So this was a theory developed by Crenshaw, who talks about racial and sexual and sex discrimination. So she uses that as an example. So she first coined the phrase. So I think to read that out would be really important. So it's about, I think it's to do with employment law. So she talks about in this way: consider an analogy to traffic in an intersection, coming and going in all four directions. Discrimination, like traffic through an intersection, may flow in one direction and it may flow in another. If an accident happens in an intersection, it can be caused by cars travelling from any number of directions, and sometimes from all of them. Similarly, if a black woman is harmed because she is in the intersection, her injury could result from sex discrimination or race discrimination. And she talks about these kind of overlapping categories like gender, race, and class are best understood as overlapping and mutually constitutive rather than isolated and distinct. So the reason I talked about that in the article, because when we went to the court for disability discrimination, we mentioned that we felt there were some issues of racism, and they said, "Oh, is this about race as well? Because you'd have to have that heard somewhere else."
Yeah, it's like you have to check this box or this box.
That's another court. Yeah. So we're there for disability discrimination, and to me, the whole thing about actually this is about the lack of recognition of his autism, therefore in terms of ableism, and also characterising him in a particular way as a naughty boy, which is what black boys are characterised as. Either naughty, violent, angry, all of those things. So those two combined, he then in terms of simpler language, it's a double whammy.
Right.
And being young. So in terms of that intersection, about how do those things interplay, and what does that mean for somebody who's facing that double discrimination in those circumstances? And what we know
about that in this group a lot and we talk about the multiplier effect, because when you add race plus disability, it doesn't just add, it it is exponential, the effect that it has.
Yeah.
And so we talk about it as like a multiplier, not just as an adding. It compounds it so much more when you add more than one marginalization, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
Yeah, and the compounding effect in the UK is that you are 168 times more likely to be permanently excluded from school if you're a black boy with a special educational need or disability. That's the multiplier.
Repeat that.
You are 168 times more likely to be permanently excluded from school if you're a black boy with special educational needs and a disability and on free school meals. So, poverty is also one of those multipliers. 168 times more likely. And that's not something that's just been made up. That came from the Children's Commissioner, our UK Children's Commission, to say as a vulnerable group, this is what happened. And we already know that autistic children are 60 to 68% more likely to be permanently excluded from school. So those things do multiply. And then the implications of that multiply. So you not only got the permanent exclusion, then okay, where do they go? What kind of education facility they go to? How are they treated as children being out of school? What are they accessing? How they're being looked at and seen as? All those things. And then, there's a whole sort of idea about it's, going into those school environments where you're now excluded. It's the pipeline to prison. Because you're also with other kids who've got difficulty behaviours or difficult backgrounds. So you're putting all these children together who are really vulnerable without proper support and qualified, professional support. I'm not saying the people who work there haven't got that. We're talking about therapists and psychologists and people who can, kind of work with the children around what's going on for them. Provide enough education. My son was going to school for, 2/3 of the day and then being let out or let off somewhere. I think, well, where was he going to go at that time of day? This isn't as high quality education as you get in school, because as a result of him going through that system, he was then on a reduced timetable. So he could only achieve so many, grades at the end of the school year. And then what does that mean? Can you get into college? How defeated do you feel? This is 15 months of his life that, has really had already, he's 18 now, a lasting impact on his sense of self and his confidence and the injustice that he faced.
We had an interview this summer with Jennifer Litton-Tidd, and she is with the Alliance Against Restraint and Seclusion and Restraint here in America. She also works with the International Coalition as well. But the statistics that she talked about, just in terms of seclusion in America, but they were just mind-blowing when we're talking about the punishments for our black children as opposed to our white children. And it boils down to that language. And it starts all the way at the very beginning when they're little with the diagnosis of children, because not that long ago, autism was seen as a white boy. Our black children were diagnosed with what? Or if they were diagnosed with anything, they were diagnosed
behaviour disorders, oppositional defiance disorder, ADHD, because if you get a diagnosis of ADHD, you can medicate these people. If you see them as people, that's one thing you can do. If you get an ADHD diagnosis, you're going to get medication, and you're going to be expected to have that given to your child. Otherwise, you're not cooperating as a parent.
I was just talking to one of my husband's cousins just the other day, and she was looking for resources. She lives in my area. And she was telling me about her 3 kids and her little boy who had, I think he had 6 diagnoses.
Okay.
And they ran the gamut: ADHD, ODD, cognitive delay, speech delay, and he's a runner. He's an eloper.
Okay.
Now, what does that sound like to you? It sounds like they went all the way around the world. When they could have just gone over here and given him an autism diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, well, why he has all of those is because he's black. And you need to go find somebody else to diagnose him.
So I was offered the opportunity to have my daughter assessed for ADHD. So no thanks. You're not going to do it. Don't rent it to me again. That was it. It was done. But, I'm in a position where I could, have that kind of conversation with those professionals, because I also work in a similar field. So, that whole difference about, recognising your own power and privilege in those situations, that I was absolutely not going to go through that and allow that to happen. But lots of other parents are faced with that. I was in a situation knowing children who were taking medication, and I know it's a huge controversial thing, but this guy wasn't growing. And then said, well, what we do is we switch the medication then because they need to put on weight. And these are like very small, underweight children. So we switch the medication. And then the next thing, the child's not okay with that medication, feels like they're kind of going out of the mind. And this is okay. This is, these are the long-term implications of these gateway drugs. 30 years down the line, we're giving this to our children. And I know it's controversial and some people say it really, really helps. But I think we really need to think very, very carefully about what we're doing to very young minds. With not enough evidence base, I think, in terms of long-term effect or damage.
My Black autistic daughter was pushed out in 2nd grade. We got a lot of comments. I have to scroll up. Let's see. Yeah, we got an ODD, ADHD diagnosis at 5 with the ADHD med track that made things worse. Finally got an autism diagnosis at 10. The same thing happened to our family. After the top doctor at the top hospital, and we had the best of the best. And after she did a very thorough psychological evaluation, she came back and she said, no, there's no signs of autism. His IQ is 58. And so that's what's going on. I knew that wasn't right, but I didn't have enough of a clue to really challenge her assessment the way I could now,
And it's also knowing what that assessment is. Is that assessment tailored towards meeting an autistic child's needs in terms of the way they might answer something, or the way they see the world, or the perception that they bring into it, the sense that they bring into it. They're not designed in that way, so you're going to fail because it doesn't make any sense. I remember my daughter being asked, so what did you think the frog was thinking? Said, how would I know? It's a frog. That's a really sensible answer. How would I know what a frog's feeling? Or no, what's a frog feeling? How would I know what a frog's feeling? It's a frog in a book.
I mean, honestly, it's the chicken or the egg. It really starts when these professionals are going to college and what they are taught.
Yeah,
right.
And what they understand and what they've also taught themselves. And I think that's just coming back to the stuff on intersectionality. One of the things I really wanted to look at when I was doing my course was this, what's the theory around autism? What's the theory around race? And, there was something when I was looking at thinking, they just look the same. It's othering. Yeah, it's describing people as less than human. So, some of the language that's used about autistic people is like, not quite human, or,
empty shells.
Person in there somewhere, as in terms of race theory, it's that, well, they're not really quite human, are they, after all, even though we've had to kind of, release them from enslavement. So to me, there's those two things, running in parallel. If you're othered in that way as less than human, then some of the experience, the treatment and the abuse that comes with that in the background. You're not one of us. You're not one of us, and I don't expect you to behave like one of us. And therefore, we have a whole way of actually treating people like you.
This is in the textbooks, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm thinking, is it Baron Cohen? I was going to say Sacha Baron Cohen. No, it's not him. It's her cousin, Simon Baron Cohen. The sort of way that he describes his theory of mind, that ability to be able to know what's in somebody else's mind. This is all, this is recent stuff. This is not that far away. But it's like, oh, that was back in the day when we didn't really know what it was. No, this is recent stuff, lack of empathy. I think it was the Louis Theroux program on about it recently, about, these moms who, were grieving because they didn't get the child that they wanted. All this language that, how is this okay?
At one of my son's ADOS testing, she noticed how he would take my arm to reach something, right? Mm-hmm. He would take my arm, instead of pointing to say, I want that, he would take my arm to go get it. Mm-hmm. And the person doing the assessment told me that that's because my child viewed me as an inanimate object, and that he did not view me as a person, but as a tool that he could use. Okay, and I thought to myself, I wanted to say, you know what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
What are you smoking, lady? But I did not say that. But I mean, just the fact that is what she was taught, and she was pretty young. She was a pretty young therapist, and that's what she's telling other parents
Because he can't see you as a person. He can only see you as an object. There's no connection with you.
There's no connection.
Friend. Sounds like it was quite useful for him to get what he needed. You're the person who's probably going to be able to reach that. So, of course, you're going to be the best person to do that. And it's this kind of describing autistic behaviour. It is behaviours we're talking about. We're not talking about intentions. We're not talking about responses. We're not talking about how those challenges are, intersect with the environment. So, if your child is kind of putting the hands over their ears and under the desk and wants to get out, well, there's probably something in there that's causing him a lot of distress. Not he's just misbehaving, chosen behaviour to go under the table, he's not listening to the teacher, not getting on with the work. Well, you try and be in an environment that's really overwhelming, where you've walked down the corridor, then you've gone into the class and everyone's scraping the chairs and you've got to get your books out and you're trying to listen to instructions and you've been asked to sit down when somebody needs to move about, and then you've been, by the age of 5, you're already feeling different.
And no matter what behaviour you display, they will always have preconceptions that is purposeful behavior.
Yeah.
And our Black children are not given the benefit of the doubt. And neither are our disabled children. So, yeah.
Yeah. And we know that impulse control isn't something that people have kind of, got a hold of and are able to kind of, respond differently until you're about 25. So when we talk about second grade and third grade, we're asking children to be able to behave themselves and control their impulses. Our brain development says actually that's really not in place and well established until you're about 25. So all the time we're talking about children in school under the age of 16, then under the age of 11 in junior school, and we're expecting to have this massive amount of control in an environment that's not designed for them, it doesn't support them.
The way they go about handling these children, like let's say you have a child who is a sensory seeker, instead of giving those children more accommodations, they want them to sit even stiller almost, right? And if you have kids that are misbehaving, they put them in a even more structured environment to get them under control instead of figuring out how they can make the environment fit them a little bit better. When I go into one of my son's classrooms, he's fully included. I'll go into his classroom and there's like kindergartners all over the floor. They're like rocking in this chair or they're, walking around doing an activity, and they have this free reign of the classroom almost. But then when you go into a self-contained classroom, they want them sitting. Or it's much more stringent because they have to teach them how to sit.
It's not even natural.
No, it's not.
Most children, will learn what they want to learn, and you need to follow them sometimes because they're naturally curious. How do you get to be curious when you sat in your chair and being told to sit in a particular kind of way and function? And you may only function, but not learning, not thriving, not developing.
I want to talk about building positive Black autistic identity?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about some of the work that brought me to thinking about this. Well, how do we think about developing a positive identity? So I worked for a long time as a community development worker, and part of my work was working with parents and young children in a particular area where they were often very isolated. They were Black children, and sometimes they might be the only child in the family, and some of the parents were white parents of Black children. So we were trying to work in ways to bring people together for support. And because of my own sort of political background, I was very interested in identity development, and I'd kind of come across the work of some American scholars who talked about Black identity development. And there's been further models, white racial identity development. There's a whole load of things. But I thought, well, actually, this is something, if I thought about that, as I thought about the sort of theory of race and theory of autism, that in terms of identity development, how do you develop a positive identity about yourself with very little positivity around you or celebration of your experience? So in my work as an art therapist, this was something that I felt that I could, really focus on with the children that I worked with. So for me, that was about, trying to find resources, trying to speak with them about autism, because quite a lot of the children I worked with were very, I would say probably quite depressed at having this diagnosis. It was something that was, done to them. So I spent a lot of time trying to just be very positive and, think about their aspects. So not some super power that's, from somewhere else, but what are the things that, you're really good at? What are the things that you appreciate? What are the things that are different about you that isn't about what the teacher said? Because I wasn't there in a teaching role. And so just building this language and developing it and actually looking for, positive messages about autism, and then trying to develop and find other resources to have these conversations. So, there are the famous artist in the UK, Stephen Wiltshire, is this incredible artist who can do things in fine detail. And when children saw him, they were absolutely astounded by his talent. And so for me, the message was, that doesn't mean that's you, but, people might have looked at him. And I asked them, first of all, the first question I would ask them, because he speaks for a very small part of the video, what do you think he might be good at? And the story unfolds that, he didn't speak until he was 9. So they're really not sure where this is going. And then they actually see this whole, these landscapes evolve and what he does and how he speaks about his work. They really took it in as, this is something that's really important. And we didn't know this, and nobody's told us about these things. So one of the things I challenged the school to do is we had lots of positive images around the school about Black History Month, and outside in one of the corridors where I worked, there was a whole display about autistic, famous autistic people. They were all white and they were all old. I said, maybe we could do better than this.
What, so, like the Einstein poster, probably.
Einstein, is it? I don't know. Some of these white people, I don't know the names of them.
Temple Grandin, maybe.
No, not Temple Grandin. One of the scientists, he discovered radiation or something, like Marie Curie.
An old white guy.
Yeah, and an old white woman. So there's all these older sort of scientist-y kind of people. So I thought, well, that's not even relevant. Do the children even see this when they look at it? So I actually asked for something to be redesigned, and through the work with them, we've tried to find different people that we might want on the poster. So it became a post that was actually about Black autistic people, sports people. So it was, a combination of those things, and just much more relevant to their experience. So so for me, it's about trying to support young people by having those conversations, thinking about what they knew about autism, what they understood about it, and from where they got that information. Certain children feeling very upset that they were liked the way that they were, and just sharing my experience with them, that I had an absolute understanding of what it's like to have sensory differences, to not want to be in the corridor, to like things in a certain kind of way. And really building up their sense of self initially, and then being able to look at maybe some of the wider issues for them as just young people trying to sort of grapple with all this experience of being in school and not being seen, and just trying to be there and support them with. So trying to develop that positive sense of this is something that's very different. There are lots of challenges, of course. There's a huge amount of challenges being in school. But then, really working with the children's talent. So, some were great story writers, some were had real interest in specific things and, wanted to share that. And just giving, I think for me, young people that time to talk about the things that they want to talk about, even if it's a very, specific interest. And just giving space to that, because, quite often it's like, we'll get on with your work and, well, that's not relevant. But I'm really interested. So developing that real sense of it's okay to be who you are. And just spending that time with them.
There's a book, LeDerek Horn. He's in America. He talks about the pathway to disability pride, and it comes with connection to others who are like you, and then on the pathway to disability shame, it's caused by isolation and like lack of representation, and basically feeling like you're alone in this. Yeah. And I see that a lot, especially with teenagers, because teenagers naturally think that they're like the only person on earth going through the thing that they're going through. Just teenagers in general do that. But when you compound that type of shame that has been put on you for a long time, and you've been hearing those words about yourself for a long time, and you have that weight on your own shoulders all by yourself. I just can't even imagine the depression and
that's why
thought about yourself.
And that theoretical frame was really important, because it's that understanding that there's something that happens that usually identifies you as different. So that for young children, in terms of if you think about race, it's usually the first time they experience racism. And that process might be a shock, and then moving to a sort of, and these are not a stage that one after the other, but then moving to a sort of stage of kind of just wanting to be part of the majority culture. So being completely want to be separate from anybody that's like you, really pushing that away, trying to fit in. And then as that kind of progresses, a recognition that there are other people maybe like you, and you might want to form some kind of alliances. And there's an opportunity in there to kind of develop in a conscious way to support that young person at that critical stage. So if you're questioning things or you've got negative ideas and views about yourself, actually collecting things and doing things. So for me, it was, getting videos, using Black History Month as one of those vehicles to develop that pride. And then, as you kind of develop that process with somebody, just get a kind of sense of pride about who they are. And that will shift and change, over time, or there'll be other times that might, happen. But trying to find a way to work is actually about understanding this as a process. And, it's not helpful kind of, saying to a Black child doesn't even have those words. Well, you're a Black child and that's how it is. Well, how do you support them to think about that as an identity? What might be the issues and the difficulties if they're, rejecting their skin colour, as lots of children, it's so well documented. Kids scrubbing the skin with bleach. We know this is happening at very young ages. So trying to really support them around having some sense of pride and looking for those positive role models, looking for people in their own lives who are their role models. That's having to go and look far, but, looking at the communities that they live in, who they can connect with. And I think, the issue around an autistic identity is that, we've got very little role models about what that means. There's certainly no women that, are seen.
I was just going to say, it seems the issue seems cyclical. Like they're not diagnosing our Black children, especially our Black boys. They're not diagnosing them. And so in turn, they don't have as many people to pull from. They don't have a big pool of people to identify with and to represent them, and to it just keeps going around in the same cycle.
And the identity that you do get is one of being a naughty kid who just can't bloody behave, and that goes into the community, that goes into our community institutions, where that kid is always up and down. And so that it's not just in the school this is happening, where families don't have an understanding about these issues as well. Children, are struggling to be understood, and there's a whole need we have for children to behave and to act in a certain way. Part of that social contract. If you're in here, you're expected to behave in a certain kind of way. When you break the social contract, then you're othered, and then you become isolated and shunned, and all those things about shame that you talked about.
Someone said, I have found a few young Black autistic women who I follow and learn from to better support and understand my daughter's needs. Same. I have found quite a few, especially like on Twitter and on social media. But you really have to search for them. You really have to.
And they are there, and everybody needs to be searching for them.
Yeah.
Everybody, to kind of understand there's a whole other frame of reference out there that may be part of your family environment, your community, to kind of understand and know more about some of these experiences. Some very successful people are poets, rappers, writers, all sorts of people out there. In terms of that diversity of role model of people who are doing things, whether it's on YouTube, or there's the whole community that's out there that is not being accessed at all, and certainly should be part of that school curriculum in terms of what we show, what we display, all of that. So children don't feel disadvantaged and pushed out.
There is a huge lack of Black representation just in the community in general. When, I have a bajillion books on my bookshelf just because this is my interest, is books on neurodiversity and autism. And I would say maybe 10% of them have to do with, or have been authored by Black autistics, or have to do with the intersection of race and autism. And this book is a compilation here, All of the Way to Our Dreams.
You got that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so this is a compilation, and it has lots of different authors. Justice, he was in this book here, has some Black and brown authors, Leaders Around Me. This is edited by Edlin Pena over in California.
Okay.
She works at Cal Lutheran University, and she does a lot of outreach for Black and Brown AAC users in college, and I think maybe high school. I'm not sure. But other than that, I mean, there is a lack of that representation in the literature, even with neurotribes. There's not enough. There's not enough.
No. And it doesn't also speak to the the wide experience of being Black and autistic. There's a huge amount of people with so many different interests and occupations. That there's so many people to draw on, but actually, where is literature? Where's the space for people to write about their experience and share their experiences? And hopefully it'll be more. I mean, I get the sense through YouTube and things like people are able to tell their stories and just actually just people themselves, not even telling stories, but talking about their day, what some of the challenges might be, and just being more present. If you can search for them.
For anybody who is watching, this is Unmasked on Facebook, and she's on Instagram and Twitter. That's our friend T.
Okay. Hi, T.
I love her Instagram is my favorite, and I don't know why. I don't know. She must cross post, but I don't know. Like, I see her on Instagram. I love seeing her content on Instagram because it does shine a different light on the conversation, and her work is important. So thank you, T. So for educators who may have Black and Brown autistic students, or who care to enlighten others about that, what kind of advice would you give them? Like, what are some practical things that we can do in our
book?
I like your style. I do.
Just get the book.
I respect that. Yeah.
I think the biggest issue is this whole medicalization and pathology of autism. I think that is the biggest issue, I think, in the school environment, because they don't have another way to think about it. And it's only through my forcefulness, and it was kind of fed back to me by somebody who was supporting us in our school meetings. He said that what was amazing was that he never talked about autism in a medical model on any level whatsoever. And every time the school tried to go there, he just, came back with something. But, I'm somebody who's studied at, length in terms of thinking about these issues. He was able to kind of bring those arguments to the table, and just was absolutely refusing to see this as a kind of, disorder or something to be, fixed in some way, or, choosing the right behaviours. Like, actually, it's about understanding what the behaviour is trying to tell you. What is it trying to tell you? If you're not sure, and yes, some of it will be teenage, young boy stuff. Of course, it will be. But there might be ways in which that you're actually, dealing with a young person. So, the issue for my son was that he'd actually had his headphones taken off him during school. Now, he needs his headphones. He used to kind of play music a lot. He was never allowed, but he was absolutely determined that that's what he had in his ears, because that's the way he could cope in school. So they were taken off him with the promise he will get them back at 3:30. So he went to find the teacher. He was already late, missed the bus by then. So he's, his heart is agitated, he's angry, he's 6 foot tall. It's like, it's, not okay with this. And he's determined to get those headphones. So he approached the teacher, who promised to give them to him. He said, oh, such and such a body's got them now. So then he had to go wander around the school. So you can imagine, this is after 3:30, he's wandering around the school. He finally finds a teacher who says she has them. At that point, he's cross. Of course he will be.
Well, he's flustered, and I mean, who else wouldn't be?
Yeah, it's beyond what's going to be reasonable now. Give him a headphones. Don't speak to me like that. Well, just give him a headphones. I want them. And because he wants to go home by now. So he said, well, I'm not giving them to you if you're going to speak to me like that.
Like what?
Directly. So he was then asked to say, please. So he did. He complied. He said, right, please. No, I want you to say it properly. Can you imagine? Can you imagine at this point how he must have been so humiliated by this woman? Say it properly. So he refused to. He just said, you better give me the headphones now. Got very angry, started shouting. It's not a kid who's going to grab hold of you or hit you or anything like that. Got very, very angry. He was telling about herself, or the better course. Then you get all the other teachers come out. There's now a group of teachers around him. They're trying to move him into the school. And next thing, they're on the phone saying to me that, it's got to a point where we're thinking of calling the police because he refuses to leave the school. I thought, well, at what point did anybody think, let's just de-escalate this situation, because this kid's clearly not in control now. Yeah, he's not lost control, but he's not in control of his emotions. He's really angry and upset. Wouldn't it be just okay for that? I'll give you them today, but you know what? Can we have a conversation about this tomorrow? No. That's what got him excluded from school. Not shouting at teachers, not swearing at teachers, didn't swear, anything like that, not threatening anybody. The fact that he wanted his headphones at the end of the school day, he didn't say please in a way that they expected him or wanted him to say it. She further wound him up. She actually was quite, flippant, I think, and sarcastic with him. To a teenage boy who's also autistic. Where's that going to go? He's not stupid. He knows he's being ridiculed. And as far as he was concerned, she was taking the piss. So where's that going to go? Anybody could have predicted that. And of course, then they then characterised as aggressive. I don't even know if they called him aggressive at that point. Not willing to leave the school. Very challenging. He hadn't done anything. He'd actually gone and done what he was asked, told to do. Go and get his headphones. They didn't have to do. They didn't have to do that to him. And for me, it's that they're waiting. And that kind of setting kids up. Because it's not going to take a lot for somebody who's already, a teenager with hormones, angry, upset, that time of the day, just wants to get his property back. It wouldn't have taken a lot. All he had to do is de-escalate. And this is what, we said several times, even with my daughter, who's much smaller than him. Where was the de-escalation? Where was the, let's all just take a breath, stand back, we'll come back to this in a minute, or you just take a little bit of time out because you look distressed. You look anxious, and what I'm saying isn't going to be any more helpful to you right now. So let's have a plan for this. We're talking about risk assessment. My daughter's had a risk assessment in her college, and the risk assessment is let's risk assess her across the whole of the day, so we make sure that none of the challenges that she might face or barriers that she might face are going to be there. That's what their risk assessment was, and that's things like, has she got a snack? Make sure she's got a drink with her in the morning when she goes out, because she really gets kind of low blood sugar. If she's going to go straight to training, make sure that she knows what she's doing. And this risk assessment is actually about it was a care assessment as far as I'm concerned.
Caring assessment, yeah.
Care assessment and it was across the whole of the college day. She's actually away at college. She's very young away at college, so she's she's learning to live independently from home. She's in a basketball college, so she's grappling with a lot, and the response from the college has been, let's think about across the day what we can do to make sure that she's not disadvantaged or discriminated against or put in a stressful environment unnecessarily. We've had to do work with them, but they've taken on board what I've said to them, because it's okay not to know. It's okay not to have this understanding, and you don't know each child until you've met that child. So whatever you understand about autism, get to know the child. Yeah, get to know the parents, think about strategies that work.
Well, let's not even get in, I don't want to give away your entire chapter that you wrote, but let's talk about the microaggressions.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like that might be what it is. Microaggressions, I've heard of it before. Your chapter was kind of the first time that I really started to apply that. So I don't, was that a microaggression?
Well, that's probably macro, that one. I would say that, across the day. So, this is a typical thing that my children would tell me. Mum, we were at the bus stop. There was 10 black kids at the bus stop, Mum, and the bus driver went past.
He was what? Say it again.
The bus driver went straight past and didn't stop with the school bus. So now these children are late for school. So they walk into school flustered, upset, because they've all experienced this collectively. Now they're going to be told off by the teachers. They're then trying to explain what's happened, and they're not able to explain. So one of the things that my daughter used to experience when she used to go into school, they were expected to take the coats off before they get into the building. There's this whole thing, coats off, in the building. Now for her, she has a very set way of doing things. She has to go through the doors, get out of the rain, stand on the carpet, away from everybody else, and then take a jacket off. She does it in a certain kind of order. And she'll be told to go back outside and take it off. Now already she's fired up now. This is now, beginning of the school day. She's not even got in the building yet. So she's already not okay. She's probably got a frown on her face. Then the next thing that somebody says to her, what's wrong with you? So that's the second thing. She's not even got into the classroom yet.
Not good morning.
Yep, she's not even got into first class yet. Then she goes into the assembly, which is the thing before school starts. She's in a crowded place. She gets hot because she has to wear the school uniform. But I said, no, you don't have to. take your blazer off. If you're overheating, take it off. Then she'll be told by somebody else, put your blazer back on, you're not in uniform. Now, for her sensory issues, this is driving her, up the wall. She's already had all of this happen just before she's even got to there. Then she goes into the next class, already distressed, already upset, expected to settle. And one of the difficulties she used to have was she'd be being treated really badly by some of her classmates. They'd start clicking the pen behind her, clicking the top of a pen. Now, they know she can hear that. And then they stop doing it when the teacher, when she shouts, "Stop it!" the teacher turns around and says, what's going on? Sit down, be quiet. Now that she knows she's being bullied in this situation, she tries to explain to the teacher, sit down, do your work. She takes a deep breath, storms off out the class because now she can't cope, goes outside to use her timeout pass, and then is being asked, well, what are you up to? And she hasn't even got to break yet. Then she has to negotiate leaving classroom early so she can go to the dining hall so she doesn't have to face all the crowds. And then when she gets there, because she wants something specific, and they're telling that she can't go to the front of the queue. Well, she can because she's allowed to. So, and this is, across the day. There might be one or two classes that she's been in where they've kind of understood and are a bit more kind to her, but that's just trying to navigate.
It's like a ball in a pinball machine.
Yeah.
Just getting clang, 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 clang. Just tossed around, and she's just expected to.
And she's exhausted, yeah. And then she gets to the classroom. The teacher gives out, the sheets of paper, and lo and behold, hers is not printed on blue because she needs a blue paper. So she goes to the teacher. I can't read this. Well, you're going to have to go up to the photocopy room and get it sorted out. And then she says, but the light's too bright on the screen. Well, tough. So then now she's, affected by the light. She can't concentrate on her work, and therefore she doesn't get the education that, she's there to get. All of the things that would need adjustments in that situation don't cost a penny. And that's the microaggressions. It doesn't cost anything to do this stuff.
And it's ironic that we as adults understand, if, let's just say, we were on our way to school or we were on our way to work and our car didn't start. Mm-hmm. Would that not mess up your entire day? You're late for work.
Yeah.
And you're just, I'm done. I'm done for the day. I just can't even, we as adults say that, and we give ourselves that grace and just say, you know what? I'm just gonna not talk to anybody. I'm just gonna, gonna lay low. I'm gonna get myself together, whatever, go treat myself to something so that, but for kids, they are expected to
next class
on all this other extra stuff that we can't even take on ourselves.
Absolutely.
Somebody says this is why we unhomeschool. I will never understand why teachers start power battles with kids. I always wound up with the kids in my class that all the others called trouble, but I never had any trouble. Right.
Yeah. And it's about respect. How do you respect a young person when they're clearly distressed and need your support?
Just smile. Just smile at the kid and say good morning.
And just to me, I always said, there's a really simple question that you can ask that'll give you loads of information. What do you need right now? That's it. What do you need right now? You may not know, but in a time when that time has passed, you can maybe work something out that this happened then. If this happens again, what would you like from me? What would be the best for you? What would get you through this moment, whether it's, being stuck on a question or being frustrated in the exam environment, whether it's being hungry and, being kept behind in the classroom, but you can't get your lunch now because the teacher wants to speak to you. Those things shouldn't be happening. They're microaggressions. And they're going to put kids right up against those teachers in terms of, what they are expecting from you as a young person in the behaviour contract that you sign that you can't actually meet because of all your differences and the way that you process stuff and the way that you navigate your day. You cannot meet the challenge of those school behaviour rules. And, in England, we've got this get tough policy. That's going to have a serious impact on children. Things are kind of messed up right now in terms of coronavirus, but they're actually, I was just speaking to my brother today, he was saying that the rise in exclusions and breakdowns and distress amongst Black families is massive.
The zero tolerance.
Yeah.
Tough policies.
Yeah. You come to read the school rules, you're out. Well, what about actually making those rules? Where's the reasonable adjustments in those rules?
When I was a teacher, I used to have like one of my coworkers on the other end of the school.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a kid that was having like a really hard time and is just, about to lose it, I would say, "Oh gosh, I forgot to give Miss so and so." I had fifth graders, so that hormones are starting
Mm-hmm.
at about that age, and I would say, I forgot to give Miss whoever it was this blue pen back. Can you go give it to her, please? And just the act of walking from one end of the school to the next,
Mm-hmm.
and coming back and having that time to breathe and not have to talk to anybody. And
the message that you give, I trust you, you're a responsible person.
Yeah, and you're helping me out. Like, thank you. Oh my gosh, I forgot this. Mm. And I mean, I wasn't really lying. I probably did owe the teacher. I don't ever return anything. But I mean, it's more of like oh, you're not in trouble. Just can you help me out with this? Sometimes you don't even have to address the behavior. Mm-hmm. Just let it go. Mm-hmm. I don't always act on my best behavior.
No,
I don't.
It's that thing about that de-escalation. What is in your mind at that time when the child's clearly in distress, needs some support? To pile it on, to pour, onto it and actually make it worse, or to say, okay, there might be another way to think about this right now because I know this child, or some other teachers know this child and what works best for him. And it's not always going to work all the time, but it's actually about saying, I'm giving you that chance to kind of, work with me on this. And the more you hear that, as opposed to the negative messages, you're going to build those, positive ideas about yourself, those positive muscles about that you can exercise, when you get a bit more control. And we should be, feeding those and helping them grow those. It's tough. It's really tough in an environment like this. And saying it is, tough to be in school. And I'm not surprised, you're acting like you are acting, or you're acting out because of the stress of the school. What would be helpful right now?
Trust and relationship is vital when you work with an autistic child, young person.
For so many people who had a negative message for a very long time, even if it's just a bit about, I don't know what's going on with the kids, or they don't do what I'm asking them to do. They've had this, this absolute build of negative messages, and we've got to kind of challenge that and provide something else, because you know that as a teacher, as a parent, we're living with these children. We know what sort of responses they're getting from the community, from families. If that's been a negative response to a school while we're trying to work out what's going on, then you've got to undo some of that and unlearn some of that negativity and how you see yourself. And we know children absorb all that negative stuff and can only think of it as something wrong with me.
And I also feel like if the kid doesn't know like what would help them, it's okay to just let them, just to be there with them. Like, you don't have, like me, myself, I'm not a big talker. When I get upset, I don't talk. I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk about it. Some kids are like that. And just to give them that space, just to give them, like, just to say, one of my friends says, I'm just holding a space for you. And to let them know, like, that's okay. And I'm here for you if you need me. And to let them kind of process it the way that they process it.
And for me, that question is like, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
Do something back to them and saying, well, I might think about that, I might not. But that child might say, I want you to go away. They've expressed what they need. I want to be left alone. Stop bothering me.
And that's okay for them to say that.
Yeah, children will have a response. Might not be able to be met at that time, but it's an opportunity to respond and say, I'm really listening to what you need right now.
Yeah.
We can go back to this conversation, tomorrow, because it's like, there's always the next day. In school, there's always the next day to have that conversation.
There was another statistic in your chapter, and it said at the University of Pennsylvania found that African American children were 5.1 times more likely to be misdiagnosed with a conduct disorder before being diagnosed with autism.
So that's what, 5 years of 10 years of lost sort of opportunity and support.
Well, it's 5 times more Black kids that are being treated like they're bad instead of being treated like they need help.
Yeah.
You know, that's 5 times more Black kids than white kids that are slipping through the cracks and will ultimately, I mean, not ultimately, but may ultimately be pushed into the prisons. You know, I mean, you got the bad kid, they get in trouble. Sometimes they drop out. Sometimes because their needs are not met, they drop out or they're suspended. More trouble. And when after you hit puberty and you're a Black kid, you're not a kid anymore.
No,
they don't see you as a kid because you're tall and you're scary looking. I'm being sarcastic there. You're not scary looking, but I mean that's how society is seeing you, and they are treating you like a grown man if you're a Black kid after puberty.
Just going back to that thing that, you know, you're scary. So when we look at these characteristics of different groups of people, so Americaners, the red, choleric and straight, they've got straight, black and thick hair, gaping nostrils, face and beardless chin, described as unyielding, cheerful and free. Paints himself in a maze of red lines. I don't know what that means. Then it goes down. So you've got Europeus, plenty of yellow hair, blue eyes, light, wise, inventor, protected by tight clothing. Yeah. So then you've got the Asiatic people, sallow, melancholic, stiff, blackish hair, dark eyes, stern, haughty, greedy, protected by loose garments. So this is a description of these different races. Afrikaners, black, phlegmatic, lazy, dark hair with many twisting braids, silky skin, flat nose, swollen lips, women with elongated labia, breasts, and lactating profusely, sly, sluggish, neglectful, anoints himself with fat.
And notice that that's the only race that they talked about somebody's labia.
Yes, absolutely. So
that did not go unnoticed.
Yeah. So if when people say, well, I'm not racist, and I don't see colour, but you've been influenced by all this stuff because your very reaction is about don't trust this group of people. Do not trust them because through all this theory and descriptions and lack of representations and the representation that we have that are negative. This is the image you've got of Black people. When you've got Black children who are misbehaving, they're just going to become this. So let's nip it in the bud now. Let's get rid of these kids. Let's put them on behaviour watch. And clearly they don't know how to behave because actually we don't expect them to. So we expect a behaviour disorder. We can see that because that really fits in with the narrative, of slavery and the reasons that people justify slavery. And that's not gone away.
And people need to be aware of that they are influenced by that no matter what.
And just the fact that we talk about races. We talk about different races. There aren't any, in that it doesn't exist. But it doesn't stop it from being used as a language. Mixed race, different races, racial differences, racial groups. We have this term, I don't know if you have it here, we have here BAME, Black and minority ethnic people, this lumping together of this huge, diverse population that's, a majority of the world population, but we're going to use this really small acronym to describe a whole group of people with varying needs, different religions, different cultures, different languages, different ideas about the world, different perspectives. BAME.
One of the Facebook users said, can we talk about how ABA/PBIS negatively impacts our Black kids, especially as it feeds the pipeline?
Now, we don't have a lot of, I know it's coming, we don't have a lot of ABA as far as I'm aware in terms of being watchful of what's happening in this country. We don't have a lot of that, but I'm sure it's not far away. There are definitely organisations who are now setting up and providing ABA. And if we're talking about Black children who are not behaving, who are not doing as they've been asked to sit on their hands and keep quiet, then you perpetuate all those stereotypes as well in your own mind by using this system that is traumatizing that strip somebody of their identity and who they actually are.
I mean, all of the things that we've been talking about is how the school systems are treating our kids, and they are using PBIS. In the school system, they're not going to call it ABA because they can't bill for ABA.
Okay.
They're going to call it something else. So it's important for parents to recognize behaviorism no matter what they call it.
Yeah.
Because it's only looking at what they're doing and assuming they're doing it on purpose and only trying to chop the behavior off at the top.
Yeah.
Another piece of advice for parents from me, I don't usually give advice. I usually let y'all give the advice. But if you don't want behaviorist strategies used in your school systems, it's important to say that to your school boards and to say, we would rather take a trauma-informed approach or something of that nature. I would rather my children be treated with compassion than compliance. I'm going to write that down, Bobby, for us to make a letter for people to send to their school boards in the group, in the incubator.
You know, that recognition of fight or flight in the child. If the child's anxious, you know, at that point they've not got access to those, you know, resources they might use when they're not anxious. Being understanding, having a safe place to go to, having a safe person they can go to, understanding that this is something that, you know, has been triggered and it will pass, and, you know, teaching things like breathing, or just all those kind of things that are just a gentle sort of a way of supporting young people to develop that resilience and you know, ability to kind of manage in very challenging situations. And when they can't manage, there is somebody who's going to be there, who's going to support you.
And you said that you've never read Beyond Behaviors, right?
Yeah. I was a psychotherapist, so I think a lot of my sort of experience comes from, you know, supporting people to deal with, you know, real challenges in their lives.
Well, I want you to read the book. Will you read it for me? I want you to read it and tell me what you think about it, because I'm obsessed with this book and all of the things that we're talking about. She dives into all of the things about, you know, compassion and starting with trust and things like that. So read that I want you to read it and then come back and we can talk about it. Okay, I will. It's one of my special interests.
It's to help them understand the bodies and what's going on. I mean, that's really important. You know, if you're feeling panic or you've got chest pains, that's okay, but it might be to do with this, but it might be just need to do that. And we have no program, it feels, in schools for children to understand their internal systems and how to get support when things are not okay, when things feel uncomfortable inside. And knowing that maybe there is an inside you and there's an outside you, and what that might mean in a particular situation. Or, if you're feeling hot, it might be to do that you might be quite upset or angry. Just this whole language that children don't have.
If you knew this, one of my kids is mostly non-speaking.
Okay.
When he has a behavior, and it's presumed to be, purposeful and defiant, he's not able yet to come back and say, "Nuh-uh, that's not why I did it." Or this is how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
He's vulnerable in that situation, and this was the first year on his IEP plan where I went through the entire IEP and took out all of those words because they were in there. Defiant was in there. Attention seeking was in there. Maladaptive was in there. Where do you think I got that list from? I got it from my kids. Mm-hmm. This list comes from my kids.
Okay.
The next teacher is going to have this in their mind already. It was an important thing that I learned this year. Okay. And to change all of those words, like I just wrote down, this will go on the list today from you. Changing it from a risk assessment to a vulnerability assessment.
Yeah.
We really do need to help our educators support our kids better.
Mm-hmm.
And using words like emotional regulation and vulnerable, and those words are important for them to see us use.
Yeah. And to me, it's about what, if you ask yourself that question, when you, like you said, your car's broken down, you're really stressed. If you think about yourself as an adult in this situation, if I could put myself in your shoes and think, what would work for me right now if I was feeling anything like I think you're feeling? Because that's the first question. What would I want for me? Because then you can actually then think about, okay, then look at this child who's just, a difficulty. This child's having a really difficult time and having a bad day. What would I want in that situation if that was me facing this thing? And then start from there. Maybe that child doesn't know the answer. Maybe you don't know the answer. Or maybe together over some time, because we've got lots of time in school for years. Over time, you might get to learn some things that just might help us out in those times of extreme stress. Because that's what we're talking about: extreme stress. When those moments happen, and they will happen across the day, what can we learn from each situation that will give us something for the next one? And I think if you have this idea of punishment, so you get your punishment, you get your detention, there's something said at you, you get some extra work to do, but then there's no discussion that follows, so that you can hear what happened, you can hear what other people experienced, you can hear the different points of view.
I'm so happy that you joined me today.
And I'm really glad to have been on here and been able to talk about the chapter in the book.
So yeah, it's the Neurodiversity Reader. I'm going to just put it up for everybody.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. And you can get it on Amazon, or you can get it at Pavilion Publishing. And yeah, I'm so happy that you joined us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for making it so easy.